A very good afternoon to all pious yogis. We shall begin the Q&A. The first question, how to relate walking meditation to dependent originations. If you wish to understand dependent origination, you have to remember this important formula, and then you can check your practice with this formula. So it's important to bear in mind this formula in the teachings of dependent origination or paticca samuppada. So the formula of dependent origination say that when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. So I shall repeat. When this exists, that comes to be. With the rising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. In fact, we are experiencing a cause and effect, or in other words, conditionality. In a practice of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, in all the three aspects of practice. The three aspects of practice are sitting meditation, walking meditation, mindfulness of daily routine activities. If meditators wish to realize conditionality during the practice of mindfulness, meditators have to gain deep concentration. They have, in other words, meditators have to purify the mind from all kinds of mental hindrances and defilements. Then meditators shall begin to realize the specific characteristics of mental and physical phenomena and their relationship in terms of cause and effect. So when this exists or that comes to be, with the arising of this, that arises. So do you understand this part of the formula? If an object, if the object has a reason, then our mindfulness or awareness can arise. So with the arising of this that arises. So if you practice mindfulness correctly, for example, during sitting meditation, when meditators has realized that there's a movement of rising, then the awareness or consciousness of knowing or cognizing will arise instantly. If the movements of the rising does not come, does not arise, then the awareness or the consciousness of knowing can't arise. So when this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. So when the process of rising movements has disappeared, then the arising of awareness or the consciousness of knowing will also disappear instantly. It's because the awareness or mindfulness or the consciousness of knowing or cognizing has arisen because there's a process of rising movements. If there's no process of rising movements, then the awareness or mindfulness, or sometimes we refer this awareness as the conscious of knowing, will not arise. So during the practice of walking meditation, then if the mindfulness is sharp and alert, and meditators have attained deep concentration, then they come to realize that every process of movements is caused by the mind. The mind here means intention or intention. If there's no intention, then there's no movements. The movements can't take place if there's no intention. So that's why we say that all our actions are preceded by the mind. The mind here means intention or wanting. So meditators must be able to perceive the arising of intention, which is also a mental state, as a natural process. Meditators did not have to search for it or look for it. Meditators did not have to wait for a moment or two moments, just waiting for the intention to arise. As long as meditators have not yet attained deep concentration and have not yet realized the specific characteristics of mental and physical phenomena clearly, they may not be able to see the intention clearly. So For example, during walking meditation, meditators are mindful and note standing between 5 to 10 times. Sometimes they can realize that there's one thing to start the walking. That one thing is also another intention. It's because there is one thing or desire to walk. Then there's an intention arising, there's intention to live. So then there's an intention, then lifting movements will start instantly. So sometimes the intention is preceded by another intention, or sometimes intention is not necessarily preceded by another intention or one thing. So when meditators have developed sharp mindfulness, then they realize there's intention, the lifting movements will start instantly. So meditators come to realize that the pushing movements is also preceded by intention. Sometimes meditators can note the lifting movements as two separate processes. For example, lifting the heel is also preceded by intention. To raise up the front foot or the toes, that raising movements is also preceded by intention. So intention lifting, intention raising, intention pushing, intention dropping. But there's no intention to touch. When you put your foot down, whether you have intention or not, the foot will touch the floor definitely or naturally. So it's not necessary to perceive the intention to touch. Then when you're about to press the front foot, there's an intention as well. So meditators, when meditators have developed good mindfulness, and the movements of walking, or such as lifting, pushing, dropping, and so on, are getting slower and slower, then they might be able to realize 11 objects of walking meditation. Every object is preceded by intention, except touching. If the meditators have developed sharp mindfulness, then meditators will come to realize, for example, lifting movements is not a single process. It's not a long process. Meditators, for example, realize that there are 2-3 broken processes of the lifting movements. If the mindfulness is getting sharper and concentration is getting deeper, then meditators shall realize that there's a series of broken processes of movements in that lifting movements. So to realize that every broken process movements is preceded by the intention or caused by intention, meditators need very, very sharp mindfulness and deep concentration. So sometimes meditators are only able to realize the intention at the beginning of a process movements. So meditators come to realize when there's this intention, then movements will movements will be taking place. So with the arising of this intention, that movements arises. So if the intention doesn't exist, doesn't appear, then movements will not be manifested. So similarly, when meditators are mindful of their daily routine activities, then if they can realize the specific characteristics of mental physical phenomena clearly, in other words, meditators only perceive or realize various processes, movements, in those movements as movements, the meditators shall be able to perceive the intention. When there's an intention, then, for example, intention to bend the arms, then bending movements will be taking place or instantly. So, in other words, the intention causes a process of movements. So, in that way, meditators come to realize clearly intention is the cause of actions. They realize that this world is all about cause and effect. Every action, every movement is preceded by the mind, in the words, intending mind. So, in that way, meditators come to realize or understand better the teaching of karma and its results. So what is the definition of karma? The scriptures define that cetana is karma. The word cetana means intention or volition or motive. So in this practice of mindfulness meditation, it is important to realize clearly the relationship between the mind and the body. Body means body action. It's important to realize the mind or the intention or volition, motive between your mind and your speech, and then the intention and the thoughts, and so on. So, in that way, meditators have a good knowledge of Paticcasamuppada. So sometimes they will contemplate the teaching of Paticcasamuppada or dependent origination during the practice. But in actual practice, such contemplation is not encouraged. Because when meditators to contemplate on these 12 links of dependent origination, then at the time mindfulness will be disrupted. Meditators contemplates on Paticcasamuppada. That contemplation is a form of thinking. It's not mindfulness. So, for example, meditators you come to realize, the cause of aging and death, for example. Sometimes we do chant dependent origination at certain occasions, or sometimes in certain monasteries, they chant the dependent originations in the morning chanting and so on. So they realize dependent on ignorance arises karmic formation. Dependent on karmic formation arises consciousness. Dependent on consciousness arises nama-rupa, mentality, materiality. Dependent on this nama-rupa arises the six sense bases. Dependent on six sense bases arises contact, and dependent on contact arises feeling. Dependent on feeling arises craving. Dependent on craving arises clinging. Dependent on clinging arises a process of becoming. Dependent on process of becoming arises birth. And dependent on birth arises decay and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. So thus arises this whole mass of suffering. So when meditators contemplate in details, then the mind will contemplate that when what exists, does aging and death come to be. By what is there took place in me, or by what is aging and death conditioned. So meditators who have gained this experience of cause and effect or conditionality, then the mind will contemplate when there's a birth, aging and death comes to be. So aging and death as birth as its condition. So during the practice mindfulness meditation, meditators did not think about the cause and effect. Meditators did not think about, for example, anicca, impermanence. They did not conceptualize the experience. For example, this is a beginning, this is a middle process, this is the ending of the process. They did not contemplate at all. They did not conceptualize the experience at all. When we want to realize ultimate realities, in Pali, Paramattha Dhamma, we have to realize beyond words and concepts. So when meditators are mindful of a process, for example, process of rising movements during sitting meditation, a process of lifting movements during walking meditation, or painful sensation, meditators merely paying bare awareness or bare attention to these phenomena. Then, when meditators pay bare attention or bare awareness to these phenomena, for example, painful sensation, then the mind will experience this painful sensation as it really occurs. So when the mind is able to experience every process, painful sensation, or the movements of rising and falling, or the movement of lifting, pushing, dropping during walking meditation, then when there's deep concentration, then this intuitive knowledge will arise. We can't realize ultimate realities by thinking or reading the book or by listening from others. We can only realize the ultimate realities through the practice of mindfulness meditation. So that's why we always remind meditators that during the practice mindfulness meditation, they do not have to think about their experiences or to reflect on their experiences. They should merely pay awareness or pay attention to the phenomena. So similarly, when meditators contemplate on cessation, then they may contemplate the mind. When what does not exist, does aging and death not come to be? With the cessation of what, does the cessation of aging and death come to be? So, if meditators have gained experience of insight knowledge, insight knowledge of continuity, then meditators will realize when there's no birth, then aging and death does not come to be. With the cessation of birth comes cessation of aging and death, and so on. So similarly, during the practice of mindfulness meditation, meditators have to realize that the awareness or the consciousness has arisen because there's an object or phenomenon. But if the mindfulness is not well developed, meditators might have to direct the attention or the awareness, for example, to the basic object of the sitting meditation, movements arising and movements of falling, and so on. But when meditators have made some progress and practice, then they will realize that if there's a movement of rising, then awareness or the consciousness of knowing will appear there by itself and instantly. Sometimes meditators will be surprised by this process because some meditators have been directing their mind or awareness to this object, to that object. But sometimes they did not realize that without any effort, what called deliberate effort to direct the mind to certain object, the awareness or attention will appear with that clear object by itself. So in that way, meditators have to follow his awareness or his mind and note the other stronger object or clearer object. So when meditators realize about this cause and effect during meditation, then also come to realize what called birth and death. Why birth still take place after passing away of a person. So do you know after passing away of a being or person, why certain person will take birth again, but certain person will not take birth again? So a person can take birth again because there's this craving for becoming. If there's no craving for becoming, then a person will not take birth again. Similarly, sometimes some of you might be thinking, after passing away from this world, I do not come back. I do not want to come back to this world anymore. Some say I intend to born in the Deva world, and so on. So when there's this intention, what's called Cetana, there's a sutta called Cetana Sutta. You dislike this world, you intend to be born in the Deva world, then definitely you start to plan for it, isn't it? You start to plan for it. You begin to plan for it, then you have to find out what wholesome deeds should I done, so that I have enough merits to be born in this what called Deva world. Or sometimes after reading the Buddha story, some might want to meet the Anathapindika in the Deva world, and so on. So that when they plan for it, then they start to do accurate merits for them doing dana, observing 5 precepts, observe the Uposatha Sila on the Uposatha day, and so on. So, in fact, one begins to establish the consciousness, or what we call karmic consciousness. So it's because we have this karmic consciousness, after passing away, there's another consciousness will arise. Then what determines the destiny of a person or being who has passed away at that moment is due to the craving. So that's why, in brief, there's a sutta say, once there was a Devata asked the Buddha, what is it that produces a person? What does he have that runs around? What enters upon samsara? What determines his destiny? Then the Buddha replies, craving is what produces a person. His mind is what runs around. When you have passed away, then the body shall remain here. Then the mind will be taking birth again in another world. But it doesn't mean that it is the same mind that will take birth again. The mind also subject to arising and passing away. In the last moment of life, the consciousness also passed away. Then because there is clinging, then another new consciousness will arise, what we call rebirth linking consciousness. Although the scriptures say his mind is what runs around, it doesn't mean that there's a permanent mind taking birth again and again in the samsara. Then a being enters upon samsara, karma determines his destiny. So those who intend to born in the Deva world, when they have this cetana, definitely they plan for it. They will establish this consciousness. This consciousness will come to growth, it means they're getting stronger. As they accumulate merits, they will strengthen this mind or foster this intention to be born in the Deva world. So when meditators have realized conditionality during the practice, then they realize that with the passing away consciousness, as long as the craving for becoming has not removed, then this craving is one of the causes of rebirth. Where this being or person will take birth again, that depends on the karma that's ripening in the last moment of death. Then how does one, if one aspires to be free from samsara, then what should be done? Then one must remove these defilements, craving. So craving can arise. The root of craving is ignorance or delusion. So for example, Arahant will not take birth again because Arahant has uprooted the craving for becoming completely. So with the passing away the consciousness, there's no more arising of another consciousness. So realizing this dependent origination is the foundations of the progress. So if meditators could slow down their movements or actions during the retreats, they may be able to realize this conditionality. Every process of movements is preceded by the mind, in other words, intending to do or wanting to do. During sitting meditation, meditators realize that the consciousness always arises because there's an object. When the object has disappeared, then consciousness will also disappear instantly. Similarly, if craving for becoming and other defilements have been uprooted completely, then the consciousness will not arise again. So, in order to see conditionality clearly, meditators have to purify the mind from all kinds of mental hindrances and defilements. Then they shall be able to realize the specific characteristics of mental and physical phenomena clearly, and their relationship or in terms of a cause and effect. In other words, during sitting meditation, the physical phenomena, such as the movement of rising, falling, or heat, or hardness, or body sensation, condition the arising of the consciousness or the awareness. Thinking or mental state can also condition the arising of the awareness or the conscious knowing. In the practice walking, meditation, and daily duties, meditators shall be realize that it is the mind that conditions a movement to take place, a process movement to take place, or an action to begin, and so on. So that's why it's important to mindful the mind. Then the second question, what is Vipassana jhana? It is the highest form of kanika or samadhi. In the practice of meditation, there are two types of meditation: samatha bhavana or concentration meditation, and vipassana bhavana or insight meditation. Samatha meditators are able to attain two kinds of concentration. The first is access concentration or neighborhood concentration, upachara samadhi. Then the other concentration is absorption concentration, jhana. So depending on the object concentration, for example, if samatha meditators practice Buddhanusati, then they can only attain access concentration or neighbor concentration. If they wish to attain absorption concentration, then they may have to change the object of concentration, for example, metta. Metta can lead meditators to attain a third stage of absorption concentration in accordance with the Sutta Pitaka. But in the practice of Vipassana meditation, meditators can't attain these two types of concentration. Vipassana meditators have to attain Khanika Samadhi, or sometimes known as Vipassana Samadhi. It's because when meditators have attained Khanika Samadhi, they realize that they can only concentrate the mind on an object just for a moment. Then that object will disappear by itself. Then another object will arise instantly. So meditators can only concentrate on the next object also for a moment, not more than a moment. When the mindfulness are getting stronger, meditators will realize that there's a pair of processes. When there's an object, there's a consciousness, there's a rising of consciousness perceiving that object, and that object pass away instantly. Then that consciousness, so this consciousness, the arising of this consciousness is being conditioned by the object. So when the cause has passed away, the effect also pass away. But there's no a person or yogi observing or mindful of this consciousness. Consciousness doesn't know himself or herself. Consciousness can only be perceived by another process of consciousness. So that's why there's a saying that mind knows the mind. The commentary to Abhidhamma explains with a simile. Just like the touching of the fingertip. Can the fingertip touch itself? Actually, fingertip is being touched by the fingertips. In other words, the arising of a mental state, the arising is persisting until passing away is being realized by another process of awareness or consciousness. So there's no self or yogi, a person watching these two processes. That consciousness, the consciousness that has realized the passing away object, the passing away this consciousness is being realized or perceived by the following process of consciousness of knowing. So in that way, if meditators have developed Khanika Samadhi, then they begin to see, for example, anicca clearly. Every process is arising and passing away instantly. So Vipassana meditators can only attain Khanika Samadhi, or sometimes known as Vipassana Samadhi. It's because that Samadhi gives rise to insight knowledge, that realizes anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Then the third question, when a yogi is maintaining moment-to-moment mindfulness in the walking meditation, is correct to say that the yogi dwell in and contemplating the walking in the walking. So walking meditation is one of the subjects of meditation found in the first foundation, Kaya Nupassana Satipatthana. So in the first foundation, mindfulness of body phenomena, Kaya Nupassana Satipatthana, there's a subject of mindfulness meditation. There's the four postures: walking, sitting, standing, lying down. So every foundation, the Buddha always explained that bhikkhu or meditators dwells contemplating the body in the body, or dwells contemplating the feelings, or dwells contemplating the consciousness in the consciousness, or dwells contemplating the Dharma in Dharma. So in this case, if we explain in accordance with this discourse, during walking, meditators dwells contemplating the body in the body, because these four postures are one of the subjects of mindfulness meditation in the first foundation. Do you know why the discourse say that contemplating the body in the body, contemplating the feeling in the feelings? Why is mentioned the word mentioned twice, or body in the body, or feeling in the feeling, consciousness in the consciousness, Dharma in the Dharma? So what is it? It's being emphasized here that the mindfulness should not be confused with other phenomena. In other words, when meditators are mindful of a body phenomenon, they should not mindful as mindful in the feeling, or in the consciousness, or in the Dharma. So this, for example, the word contemplating here means mindfulness, it's not thinking. So the word body or feeling, consciousness, Dharma is repeated to make sure that meditators contemplate the body in the body and not in the feeling, not in the consciousness, and not in the Dharma. So, for example, sometimes meditators perceive body painful sensation. If meditators did not understand well the Dharma, then they might think that that body painful sensation is a physical phenomenon. But body painful feeling is not a physical phenomenon. It is a mental process. When meditators can realize cause and effect clearly, they will realize that our body, the body doesn't know anything. The body doesn't sense anything. So it's the mind that will come to sense the pain, heat, cold, and so on. The body doesn't know anything. Meditators always realize that the mind or the awareness goes to the object by itself when they have developed sharp mindfulness and deep concentration. The body, for example, any body phenomenon, can't go to the mind. It's the mind that goes to the body phenomena. So similarly, we come back to just now about cause and effect. So when one intends, for example, to be born in the Deva world, then definitely one will plan to accumulates merits, so that they have a supportive condition, enough supportive condition to be born in the Deva world. So when they perform the karma, they also intend to experience present results. So the mind plans for, intend for it, plans for it. So we can say it is the mind that creates the karma. So eventually, it's the mind that experiences the result of karma, or the body will experience the result of karma. The mind. So your mind will experience present results. It will always accumulate merits. Your mind will experience painful results if the mind creates what called demerits. So our body doesn't know anything. It's the mind. That's why sometimes we say the mind is the reader. Is the leader. So this is about contemplating the body and so on. Then the next question, how to apply mindfulness approaches in workplace. So we can practice mindfulness, in fact, at any time, any place. As long as the place is suitable, for you to develop mindfulness. Why do we say that we can practice mindfulness at any time, any place? It's because you have the mind with you. If you do not have mind, then you cannot meditate. You cannot ask a dead person to practice mindfulness. So unless you are mindless, that's why you cannot practice mindfulness. But according to commentaries to this Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the discourse about the practice for mindfulness meditation, so the commentary explains about these 4 kinds of clear comprehensions. The first one is known as clear comprehension of what is benefit. When you know that you want to practice mindfulness, I believe you understand the benefits. The most important benefit is to purify the mind from defilements, from emotional mental states, emotional feeling. But the commentaries say that one should not go ahead to practice immediately. One have to consider or call suitability, clear comprehension suitability. So meditators might have to consider: is this the suitable time? This time is a suitable time to practice mindfulness? Or in this place is conducive or suitable to develop mindfulness? So similarly, during working, meditators definitely have to concentrate the mind on the working. They cannot practice mindfulness formally. But sometimes we always emphasize the importance of mindful of the mental states. During working hours, sometimes due to contact with unpleasant object or not agreeable objects, then anger or aversion has arisen. Though meditators cannot really stop working and be mindful of that mental states, anger or aversion, but at least they learn to maintain some awareness that there's anger or there's aversion. In that way, they still be able to contain their defilements. But if the time and the place are suitable to develop mindfulness, then meditators can mindful of that anger, and if possible, until it has disappeared. So when the time and the places the time and the place are suitable or conducive to practice mindfulness, then meditators come to the third clear comprehension. There's clear comprehensions of the domains of the meditators. The domains of meditators are not outside the meditators. Domain here means their own mind and body processes. So meditators at the time begins to mindful of a mental state that has arisen at that present moment of physical movements, heat, hot, and so on. So when meditators can practice mindfulness well, then definitely they will realize the fourth clear comprehension. There's clear comprehension of non-delusion. Non-delusion means wisdom, panya. So when the mindfulness is sharp and there's deep concentration, meditators can realize that, for example, there's this thought process, and there's this process of awareness, or there's this unwholesome state of mind, anger, and there's this process of awareness. So at that time, there's merely these two processes, and then both processes have appeared and disappeared instantly. There's no self behind these two processes. So this is known as clear comprehension of non-delusion. So when meditators want to meditate, practice mindfulness, they have to consider about the time and the place. Then we come to the fifth question. When an elderly or old person who cannot attain long retreats, what would you advise on practicing mindfulness? So if an elderly person cannot attain long retreats, then his home or her home shall become a retreat center for him or her. Yeah. If his children or her children who know about the benefits of mindfulness meditation, then they should give encouragements. For example, to our elderly parents, sometimes children can plan for a period of time in order to meditate together. Then they will give support to each other. So it doesn't mean that one must go to the retreat center or join an intensive retreat in order to practice mindfulness. So mindfulness can be practiced at any suitable time, suitable place. So at home, of course, the family members should have the initiative to create a conducive time and to make the home a conducive place to meditate. So we also have to create our own supportive condition. Then question number 6 in Mandarin. 当行禅时，杂念出现，标记杂念时，是否脚步要停下来，还是继续走？这要看情况。如果正念修行者已经获得瞬间定，当时杂念或是想特别少。如果有想或是杂念的出现，也是非常短暂，可能只是持续 一瞬间或是2瞬间。有时在这种情况，修行者并不一定要停下来，但是有时在行禅的时候，杂念想或是其他的心法特别多，出现的次数相当频繁，而且修行者觉知杂念升起相当迟钝或者说缓慢。那么在这种情况，修行者最好在觉知到有一个杂念妄念，最好当下停下来，但是不应该去注意停，尽快的去觉知当下的杂念或是想。如果杂念并没有即刻消失，或是真的当下的心法并没有即刻消失，那么修行者就要标记想，所以当时他尽可能保持正念觉知想，或是当下发生的一个心法，并不是在觉知标记。Then the next question, can you recommend any good Dharma book titles or any sutta we can refer to in future for practice? So if you are interested in the practice of Vipassana meditation in this tradition, where we begin with the 4 material elements, then you may read various books on Vipassana meditation written by Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw, Sayadaw U Pandita, Chamye Sayadaw, and so on. And you want to know about this discourse, Mahasatipatthana Sutta, then you may read this discourse as well. There's a book written by Sayadaw Silananda on the four foundation of mindfulness. You may find this book in the bookshop. The publisher is the Wisdom's Publications, United States. You may also read another book. There's the Heart of Buddhist Meditation. It's also good to read, refer to that book as a reference in the practice. Then the last question, is it possible to enroll as a novitiate or monk where you study as a monk in Myanmar? If so, can you please advise whether it's possible and the steps in preparation, i.e. to write to the monasteries, etc.? Is it possible to join your monasteries if one does not understand the Myanmar language? Yes, if you are interested to become a novice or monk, then you may have to write to the centers to request for sponsorship letters and to ask permission to be ordained. There are some meditation teachers in the center who can speak English well. So even though you do not know the Burmese language, you might also go there to learn to practice meditation intensively, as well as to learn the Dharma. But as far as I know, now it's not a conducive, it's not so safe to go to Myanmar. The center where I was ordained, Chamye Yeta Meditation Center, as far as I know, the center at this moment is not open to foreign yogis. They only accept the local yogis. So you have to wait until the situation or condition has improved, then you may plan for the trips. You may write a letter to that center to request a sponsorship letters, and your intention to go there, to be ordained, to practice intensively, and so on. So this is the end of Q&A.